Ladies and gentlemen, the lecture is about to start. Please make your way to the room. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the lecture is about to start. Please make your way to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, the lecture is about to start. Please make your way to the room. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural lecture by Professor Anna Francis. We are delighted to have you with us tonight. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. If I can please ask that your mobile phones are on silent. Brilliant, thank you very much. No one actually moved, so you're great. You can come to every event. We're not expecting any fire alarms, so if there is one, it is real. Please calmly exit the building. We've got fire exits on your right, left, and behind you. Our assembly point is at the car park 2, which is just on the left-hand side of the building. Without further ado, normally I would introduce Professor Martin Jones, but we have a little bit of a surprise. So, well, it's Anna's lecture, so we're doing things Anna's ways. So if I can introduce Mavis Davis.
I've prepared a little introduction that I am reading from my iPhone. Very modern, that's right. So, a successful creative collaboration is a rare, unique and special thing. And I'm not going to get emotional, excuse me. And when two artists come together with a shared fire in their bellies to challenge social justice and celebrate our communities as assets, it's something you must lean into because it's about finding your people. And in this campaign for justice in our neighbourhoods, you've got to find your people. But when those two individuals also somehow are fans of urban planning and community development, as much as they are of comedy duos, it can lead to some very special and surprising outcomes. A daytime TV show called Scratching the Bottom of the Architecture Itch, for example. A banquet in a tent on a brownfield. A performance staging the death by design of social housing. A show called Potterioke, which is karaoke, where you also throw a pot. And if you don't know about that, where have you been? Or even a business plan for a small but hopeful community interest company that would later lead to being part of the Arts Council National Portfolio. Yes, sisters! My name is Mavis Davis, and I have known Anna Francis since 2015, when my social club came to Portland Street. This was because artist and resident Anna had requested arts organisation Appetite to bring more art to the streets where she lived. The Oasis Social Club was created by artist Rebecca Davis, who couldn't be here tonight. We're rarely in the same room together, which is such a shame, who had a lot of beef about problematic regeneration processes, and she wanted to find ways for our communities to come together. So did Anna. Just a year later, they were hosting an event titled Community Development Business Plans for People Who've Never Written a Community Development Business Plan Before. They're good at titles. Anna is one of the biggest champions of artists and advocating for the value that art can have in our lives. It's something she's been committed to for many, many, many years. Still so young though. And it's something she practices every day. This work and energy is so important, particularly in a city where there are few artist studios or spaces to exhibit and come together with other artists. In a city where monetary investment is rare, particularly in the arts, investment of capacity is what artists have always done to make the dream a reality. Anna has demonstrated this in so many of her projects, making art happen when all you have to go on is an idea and a gut feeling. This can become a driving force for change, especially when you're in it for the long haul. Ultimately, it's about imagining a world we want to live and be happy in, and artists are excellent at imagination. Anna also happens to be brilliant at speaking about these things too, so you're in for an absolute treat today. I'm immensely proud to call Anna my collaborator, my friend, sorry, and my neighbour. Right, core. And it's so brilliant that amongst all the artists, thinkers, activists, architects, mothers, chefs, footballers, dreamers and builders we have in our neighbourhood, we now have a professor too. Woo! Yes! Now I'm going to pass over to the university's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Martin Jones. Thank you very much.
I'm old school analogue in comparison. I don't have digital anything, although this is the leading digital university, of course. Colleagues, I welcome you all to this inaugural lecture this evening by Professor Anna Francis. That sounds good, doesn't it, using the word Professor Anna. Anna has spent 20 years of experience working, as we've heard, from Mavis, working in the city of Stoke-on-Trent, an artist in practice. Anna, you joined, it sounds like this is your life, doesn't it? You joined Staffordshire University, our previous institutional name, October 2005. It's actually the 11th of October 2005, to be precise. Came in as a part-time, hourly paid lecturer, moved then to a lecturer in fine art with effect from 1st of September 2010. Anna was confirmed as Professor Francis on the 23rd of June last year in a meeting that I chair, grandly called the Professorial Conferment Committee, as well as being a substantial committee of independent academics with 5 independent folk outside of the university. We take reports from referees and several independent assessors. This meeting confirmed that Anna indeed was an excellent and significant researcher, well known and highly regarded, as we've heard from Avis, for influencing regional and national policy, making academic interventions through, quotes, this is one of the assessors' reports, a unique blend of activism, evidence-based and practice-based scholarship. Committee commended the breadth and depth of Anna's interventions and endeavours, ranging, as we heard, from exhibitions, editorials, public and practitioner workshops, participatory regeneration projects within Stoke-on-Trent, as Mavis has outlined. Anna, you were acknowledged by your peers, the independent reports that I referred to, as international leading individual with regards particularly to co-creation of collaborative methodologies, evidenced by, as we've heard, transforming abandoned gardens into parks and retrofitting, as we've also heard from Mavis, a derelict pub into a creative community hub. In short, Anna, you're also an alum of this university that I'm proud of. You've added, and this came through the committee, this is a 5-hour meeting, colleagues, we don't give these away, 5 hours where we discuss about 15 cases. You've added significantly to the knowledge base and understanding on fostering community development, influencing local and national government policy, as we've heard, alongside social arts organisations. Colleagues, we're very excited to have Anna here at University of Staffordshire, teaching the future generation of creative minds and sharing your vast knowledge that we've heard about with us today. I hope, colleagues, you enjoy this lecture, and I greatly look forward to hearing Anna's career and journey. When I got my professorial title many years ago, not that long ago, I didn't have to do one of these. Some universities don't do these. There are over 100 people in this room. It's important, Anna, that we do these. When I went from Aberystwyth University to Sheffield University in 2013, I did one of these. I had an audience of 6. 2 of those are my parents, so there's 4. When I started talking, one person got up and walked out because they're in the wrong room. So I actually had 3. One of those I probably paid to be there. There are 100 people in this room because they like you. I obviously wasn't liked in comparison. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we please warmly welcome Professor Anna Francis to her inaugural lecture this evening. And you are Professor of Arts and Society, and this public lecture is part of your rite of passage. So, a round of applause, please.
Well, what a brilliant couple of introductions. So that was all the jokes for the evening. Representing the 2 sides of my brain, artist and academic. A really enormous thank you to both Mavis Davis and the Vice-Chancellor Martin. It felt right to be introduced by them both because in many ways the talk I'm going to give today will, I hope, reveal how the 2 sides of my practice as an artist and research as an academic are key to where I stand today and to what I've been able to do here in the city. So I'd like to start actually by thanking the people in the room who've come to support me this evening, because in many ways the talk I'm about to give is a celebration of the support I'm grateful to have had from the same people sitting here today. First, a thank you to my family, and in particular my partner Andy, for your support to enable me to be a mum and do the work. But also thank you to all of you here. Perhaps you're a valued colleague here at the university, or a student or graduate that I have taught. You may have collaborated with me over the years or participated in activities across the city with me. Perhaps you have helped to shape and design the work in some way, or advised me, or been one of the important mentors who've supported my development as an artist, an academic, and perhaps even you've helped to pick me up in one of those moments when things were going wrong. Yes, we all have those. So this talk is as much a celebration of the creative community here in Stoke-on-Trent as it is a moment of reflection for me personally in my creative and professional journey in the city. I hope within the talk to touch upon the specificity of this place and why I think the city of Stoke-on-Trent offers such rich soil for a creative artist's practice to grow. Okay, so I watched a number of these talks while planning this one, and I know the team here warned me not to, but I like to be informed about format, so I couldn't help myself. And I noted that they always start with the early life of the academic, childhood photographs, important pivotal moments, and that sort of thing. So in lieu of the baby pics, I thought I would reflect back on the moment in year 9 at secondary school when I was choosing my options. My favourite subject was drama at school. I liked the way that through drama you could escape from your own life and be somebody else. That can be really useful. So while it was obvious that drama would be on the list, I didn't really mind what else I would study. And my sister, who's 1 year older than me, was studying business studies, and she said it was all right. So I wrote that down. I suppose I thought that if the acting career didn't take off, I could always become a business person. Anyway, the head of year 9 came to me and said that business studies was oversubscribed. A lot of people wanted to go into business. And they needed people to agree to do something else. And he said, there's quite a lot of space in art. And could I swap and do that instead? I wasn't too bothered and had just done an all right picture in art, so I agreed. So there began my career in the arts. Perhaps if I'd stuck to business studies, scenes like this one, with Bill and Hayley attending a business breakfast in a skyscraper in Tokyo last April, would be much more regular. Over the years, through my practice, I've been able to play many different characters and roles. A chambermaid with a trolley of artworks about hotels, a holiday rep, a regeneration agony aunt with her own daytime TV show, an estate agent, a sommelier, a city tour guide. So yes, one of the biggest reflections I want to make in terms of choosing a career in the arts is that it can enable you to do many things and have many varied and fascinating experiences. You can make artworks, curate exhibitions, design products, events, and make physical changes to places. You can be a businessman one day and a karaoke star the next. Being an artist means that you can be and do anything that you want to. And this is something that I feel quite deeply, but it isn't meant to sound frivolous or self-indulgent. From the start, I've aimed to understand what the work we do as artists means in the wider scheme of things, and how the work of artists can impact on our surroundings and the people we engage with in meaningful ways. So thinking back to myself at age 16, studying A-levels, I was living in Winchester and worked in a building next to this statue for a couple of years as a cleaner, cleaning the council offices in the evenings. Along one of the corridors of the building were drawings by Elizabeth Frink, including a drawing of a hare which I liked very much, and which I used to take a detour past when carrying the bin bags down to the skip. There was something magical about having these intimate viewings of the hare each evening when the horse and rider were available for all to see on the street. I chose to embark on a project as part of an essay for my A-levels to find out a little bit more about the sculptor's work and the other settings that it might be found in, and I visited other cities to look at Frink's work. The project I did was called Frink in Situ and included interviewing passers-by on the street next to this horse, asking them if they'd noticed the statue and what they thought of it. I asked, did it make an impact on you, and if so, in what ways? I made a tape recording of my findings, including those street interviews. In some ways, these are the questions that I've been asking ever since. Does the work of artists have an impact on our lives, and if so, in what ways? While I'm talking about the work of other artists, an important moment was watching Derek Jarman's The Garden. It was released in 1990 when I was 12, but I think I watched it around age 15. This was the first time that I understood that artists can make more than paintings, sculptures, performances. And I was blown away by the film itself. And this, alongside films by David Lynch and Peter Greenaway, inspired the films I was making at age 16 and 17. Since then, I've read quite a lot more about the garden there in Dungeness. Soon after the film, I bought this book, which visually documented Jarman's relationship with the beach landscape where he lived and the amazing, resilient garden he created there. The thing I love most about his garden in Dungeness is how the plants are able to survive despite what could be seen as an inhospitable landscape. The salt, the wind, Dungeness is Britain's only desert, and yet Jarman, through careful observation of the place, was able to defy those conditions to create what is now a place of pilgrimage for artists, garden designers, and many others. He did this by recognising the right plant in the right place, and also through his resourcefulness. Much of the material which he used to create the physical structures within the garden are beach-combed items which washed up on the shore after a storm. An artist recognising the value where others may miss it. The other important aspect of his relationship with Dungeness is that the place became a safe haven through his work, which today we would describe as a place-based approach. Then, he was creating a sanctuary for himself and his friends where they could be creative together. This embedded commitment to the creation of a place for community is important. So then, Stoke-on-Trent, perhaps, is my Dungeness. I didn't plan on coming here. I ended up here by accident. I was studying my foundation in art at Falmouth College down in Cornwall, and when deciding what degree course to do, I didn't want to have to name one specialist area. My art tutor told me about the course at Chelsea School of Art, which was a combined media course, so I wouldn't have to specialise. But he also told me it doesn't look good if you only make one application, and recommended putting Staffordshire down as the course there was also broad-based. The foundation course's external examiner was Professor of Art at the time at Staffordshire, Terry Shave. And since I couldn't afford the train fare to Stoke, he interviewed me down in Cornwall when he came down for his next visit. I was put on a reserve list at Chelsea, but Stoke offered me a place outright. It had been announced that the following year, £1,000 tuition fees were being introduced, which to someone from a working class background seemed unimaginable. And so I accepted the place to come and study in Stoke. So when in September 1997 I started the course, I'd never been to the city before and had no idea what it was going to be like or the role the city would go on to play in my life. So thanks, Terry. I blame you for everything that came next. I must have liked it because I stayed on to do my MA in art part-time and then left in 2002 to undertake a PGCE in post-compulsory education at Oxford Brookes University. And this was such a brilliant learning for me and equipped me with an understanding of different learning styles and how to design learning opportunities which cater to a range of different learning preferences and needs. This has always stood me in good stead in both my teaching practice and my creative artist development and mentoring work. And I'll draw on this still, everything I picked up there when designing sessions for our students. In 2005, I again ended up back in Stoke, and my aim then was to find a part-time teaching job and to establish myself as a practicing artist. I was offered some hours on the first-year BA Fine Art course, teaching alongside Keith Weston, who went on to be an important mentor for me at the university, providing so many learning opportunities and supporting me to be dynamic in my approach to undergraduate teaching. I'm forever grateful to Keith for the care and mentoring over those years that we worked together and his friendship to my family ever since. I thought at the time, Stoke is quite a good place to be based as an artist, being right in the middle of the country, and it's easy to get to other places. By this stage, I hadn't been living in Stoke for over 3 years, and so there were very few people left in the city that I knew. Keith introduced me to 2 graduates from the Fine Art course who'd started an art space. Dave Bethell and Andrew Branscombe had opened Airspace Gallery in a disused pottery factory at the top of Hanley. They did this because at the time in Stoke-on-Trent, there were no arts organisations, although there were a couple just across the border in Newcastle-under-Lyme. There was no dedicated artist studios for artists to work and no contemporary art gallery to see work, so Airspace opened as an artist-led studio and gallery in the Gaps. They invited me to curate an exhibition there, and so in 2006 I began research for an exhibition I wanted to put on in response to what I could see happening very physically in the city at the time. The exhibition, Indefinable City, shared the work of 11 artists exploring the relationship between the city and the individual. For my own piece of work, I visited the areas in the city where demolition was underway. All over the city at the time, factories were being pulled down, and as a result of the deindustrialisation process, one of the key themes of the exhibition centred around the housing renewal underway in the cities in the Midlands and the North. In Stoke, the Pathfinder Housing Renewal Scheme involved the compulsory purchasing of the Victorian terraced houses. My piece aimed to show the life cycle of a terraced house, and it included an architectural floor plan, an inventory of all of the items in a populated terraced house, and a photograph of the exposed gable end of a demolished terraced house on Lichfield Street, just by the Emma Bridgewater factory. I didn't know it at the time, but most of the work I've done since this piece and this exhibition can be traced back to here, and the research process that began during the development phase of the show has gone on to inform everything that I've been working on since 2006. Just going to have a quick sip of water. When I began teaching at Staffordshire University on the Fine Art course in 2005, there were quite a number of mature students who'd already had a career working in the potteries as painters, modellers, and on the production line. In Stoke-on-Trent, if you were seen as creative, especially if you were working class, it would have been unlikely that you would be encouraged to become an artist. It would have been more usual to be advised to go into the potteries and work on the production line. The mature students that we were working with back then talked about the course being the realisation of previously unfulfilled dreams of being an artist, something that they'd always wanted to do since being a young creative person, but which was not satisfied through a life in the pottery factory, where their individual creative agency may not have been so visible. So as the decline of industry was impacting employment, the opportunity offered by full student loans and fees covered by government meant that a lot of people were taking up this chance to do what they'd always wanted to do and realise their dreams of studying to become an artist. Understanding this, alongside working closely with other artists at Airspace Gallery to consider whether or not the city of Stoke-on-Trent was more viably a place where creatives could thrive and make a home, I was interested to consider how artists have experienced living and working in Stoke over the years, and whether it was becoming more possible to be an artist under your own steam here. I questioned how a city like Stoke-on-Trent, which to me, as someone not born here, felt like an amazingly creative and highly skilled city. It didn't seem as though the city celebrated its own credentials as creative as much as it could, seeing itself as industrial first rather than artistic. I was able to explore these ideas further through an exhibition which I curated in 2014 for Airspace Gallery and the Potteries Museum and Art Gallery with Jean Milton, the arts curator at the museum at the time. The Artist in the City was an exhibition which delved into the City Museum's amazing collection of artworks in order to look at the experience of artists who are from or who have lived in Stoke-on-Trent. And as the exhibition blurb said, this exhibition takes as its focus and starting point the work of 4 artists with strong connections to the city who are well represented in the museum's collection and whose work is also identified as being world class. As well as exhibiting some of those artists' works from within the collection, we also selected one of the works for a contemporary artist to research and then make an artwork in response to, as a way of also opening up the discussion about what it might be like to work as an artist in the city of today. I'll tell you about a couple of those pairings. So it was a wonderful opportunity to go behind the scenes at the museum and explore parts of the collection that had not really been seen and pull out some of the wonderful work. This is a painting by George Cartledge. He was born in 1868 and studied at Handley School of Art in Stoke in the 1890s. This painting of Staffordshire Hilltop shows a wonderful Heatherfield landscape. And we paired George Cartledge to David Bethel from Airspace Gallery. At the time, David had been making a lot of performance works where he would often be dressed as a lone worker of some kind, undertaking durational activity within the landscape. The resulting set of objects and performance documentation were displayed alongside George Cartledge's paintings. The exhibition was the most visited art exhibition that the museum had ever recorded. Perhaps other people in the city were also interested to consider the role of the artist in the city too. Terry Shave was the only museum collection artist out of the 4 that we selected that was living. This gave us an enormous opportunity to talk to Terry about what making a life as an artist in the city was really like. Terry shared his experience of losing his life's work in a fire at his studio, and this in itself talks about the precarious spaces that artists have traditionally worked in across the city. We discussed the impact that had on his practice and how, far from being something which stunted his work, Terry used that potentially devastating fire and has been incredibly prolific ever since. Terry also shared a core memory of noticing a reproduction of a painting by Constable on the wall of a Chinese restaurant when he was a child. The combination of the red flocked wallpaper and the rural scene was something that stuck with him. We talked about how those early experiences of art are relevant and how they can stick with you no matter where they are and how you have them. And it was a wonderful moment within the show to be able to pull out a Constable from the museum's collection, a local scene of the lake at Trentham, and to source a perfect flocked red wallpaper for it to be displayed upon. The painting that we showed the work alongside was from the museum's collection, which they acquired in 1990, and it was named Fire Ring Series number 15. The painting was acquired 10 years before the fire that would destroy Terry's studio and much of his life's work in 2000. So in some ways, the fire in the painting talked about what was to come. I do enjoy these moments of serendipity when curating an exhibition, but not so much the fire, Terry. Another of the pairings was Greta Marx and Carla Wright. The collection object selected was this wonderful Bauhaus teapot, which you can still see on display within the museum's ceramic gallery. This piece by Carla Wright responded to the teapot, creating a social space in the form of a set of chairs where the tea could be enjoyed. The limitations of working within the civic space meant that the seats were not able to be sat on as the artist intended. This too is interesting to note that when we work within the confines of a civic structure, there can be limitations as to how far we as artists can push at the edges. But I want to talk briefly about how the idea for an exhibition might form. The artist and the city touched on how our work as artists is shaped by circumstance, or about how the city of Stoke-on-Trent might have approached creative endeavour and creative agency over the years, aiming to understand what it may have felt, why it might have felt hard to be an autonomous artist in the city over the years, perhaps trying to work within the structures of an industry that has so heavily defined a place, it can be difficult to be recognised as an individual. And in researching the life of Greta Marx and her experience of moving from Germany to Stoke, there was something to delve into further. Before coming to Stoke, Greta owned and ran the Hale Werkstätten pottery factory in Germany, making cutting-edge designs. In the Nazi regime of the 1930s, she was particularly vulnerable, not only as a Jewish woman running her own business, but also as a designer creating pottery in a modernist style. She was forced to flee from Germany and settled in Stoke in 1936, bringing several paintings and pieces of pottery with her, items like this teapot from the museum's collection. She tried hard to establish herself in the city as a designer, but documentation shows that she found it very hard here. Her designs were regarded as too avant-garde for English tastes. Greta's story was one of the things which co-curator Jean Milton and I spoke of a lot while putting the exhibition together. She had to adapt her designs so that they would appeal to more conservative English tastes, simplifying the forms and adding floral embellishments. Jean and I realised that there was more that we wished to explore and say about the experiences, particularly of creative women working in the city. And so we worked together on a second exhibition, Women's Work, which sought to make visible the hidden and unsung labour carried out by women in the home, the workplace and public life, and in particular to redress the imbalance in history and the arts, where work made by women has been undervalued or simply not recognised. In our discussions, we talked about the underrepresentation of female artists within the museum collections on display, and so alongside the curating of the exhibition, we aimed to redress the balance. One aspect of this was to create a woman's tour of the museum, a new way to navigate the museum and its collection, including some newly commissioned works and featuring a rehang of the art gallery in January 2017, to try to move more towards a gender balance of female artists and to bring out some of the amazing works by women from the museum's collection. We flagged those works with a labelling system with purple, white and green border, the colours of the suffragettes. Jean and I spent time considering the museum collections and pulling out some of the works from display, but we also commissioned a number of women artists to make new work exploring these themes. I'm just going to share some of these series of photographs by photographer Steph Rushton, also an artist from Stoke. Steph undertook a 3-week residency with Airspace to make a document of creative women working in the city. As Jean and I were keen to really make visible the amazing variety of contexts which creative women across the city work within, and it was an opportunity to celebrate some of these fantastic artists working in the city. So I'll just show you a few of these. This is Jean Milton, arts curator at the museum, in the stores, selecting paintings. Reiko Kaneko in her Stoke-on-Trent ceramic studio. Caris Jones. Oh, it hasn't changed. I'll just wait for it to catch up. There's a bit of a lag. Is it stuck? Oh, there we go. Caris Jones, the creative blacksmith at Etruria Forge. And the amazing ceramic flower maker, Rita Floyd, who works from her kitchen table making exquisite bone china flowers, as women pieceworkers have in the potteries for hundreds of years. So I've mentioned 3 of the exhibitions that I've curated with Airspace Gallery since 2007, but there have been more exhibitions and many more events over the years, which I don't have time to talk through. All of these exhibitions questioned the role of art and artists in the development of place, and many of them were also collaborations with other artists, curators, and other specialists. I now understand the curatorial projects to be a theoretical space to make sense of some of the thinking behind the practical action research projects that I work on. And so I now want to spend a bit of time talking about my research methods before going on to discuss 2 long-standing projects that I've been working on as an artist in the city. Kemmis and McTaggart, in their book, The Action Research Planner, describe how an action research process functions. It's a form of collective, self-reflective inquiry undertaken by participants in social situations in order to improve the rationality and justice of their own social or educational practices, as well as their understanding of those practices and the situations in which the practices are carried out. I would describe the work that I do as an action research approach. My process is always to begin by looking very carefully at a site, considering its history, how people are using it currently and how they value it, what resources the place may offer, and what potential for action there may be based on what can be learnt and what people tell me about the site. Then a plan can be put together to consider what can be done. Usually this plan is a communal activity, as is the action that follows, where we enact an intervention of some kind. The intervention can be temporary or lead to something more permanent. Then together we reflect on what we now know, what happened, how was it received, what impacts did it have, and what next. If this is an ongoing work, then the process can begin again. But this time around, we know a lot more about the place and each other, and we've built confidence in our collaboration, and we may have demonstrated to other potential partners why our approach works. Though the first explorations that I began on brownfields in 2011, I started a more intensive body of work which took place from 2012 onwards, and I adopted 3 city centre brownfields and started that action research process on those sites. One was the ABC cinema site, one was the Hanley Greyhound track, which you can see in the picture here, and the other was Hanley Abattoir. And I carried out a series of investigations and events and activities on these sites. I've been privileged as an artist to be able to share my work in exhibitions, residencies, conferences and other contexts all over the world. And this is very useful and important in helping to frame the work undertaken in Stoke in a global context, understanding how it fits with what else is happening in city development. At times, I might be undertaking a short-term project in response to another place, but I'm always thinking about what this tells me about Stoke-on-Trent. In 2012, I was really lucky to be invited to undertake a research residency at Headspace, an artist residency programme in the mountains in rural Japan. This is the rice field of farmer Okata-san, whose family have been farming the hillside for more than 400 years. There were a number of abandoned farms across this hillside, with the farms remaining usually being cared for by older people, with the children of the farming communities having moved to the city. In Okata-san's case, he was in his 70s, but keeping the farm running alone. He knew that in all likelihood, he'd be the last farmer in his family. The arts organisation embedded in the community there would help with the harvest when the rice was ready, finding a new role for artists in this rural area, not just supporting the farming, but making the challenges more visible. While I was in Nara, I researched and practiced the Japanese art of flower arranging, and this, alongside what I was witnessing about the artist's role in the mountain region, informed a few of the projects that came next in Stoke-on-Trent. On my return to Stoke, I used my learning about ikebana structures to plan workshop activity for the city centre brownfields. This included leading public workshops which invited people to explore the sites with me as a space to discuss how we value brownfield sites for their ecological credentials and for the interim nature havens that they represent. It's true to say that the brownfield, due to its mixed habitat opportunities, can often be more biodiverse than a city centre green space, which can often be dominated by grassy monocultures. Participants in workshops would create impressive ikebana displays, but unlike Japanese flower arranging, instead of fancy vases and luxurious blooms, we would use discarded rubbish and weeds from the brownfield as a way to talk about how reframing can elevate the status of these sites. This has been a method within my work for some time, to find ways of reframing the city, creating spaces for people to look with me at what we value, particularly in relation to the hidden nature and potential for spaces for nature in urban settings. Birders Paradise was a project commissioned by Appetite in 2014, collaborating with my partner Andy. We transformed a semi-derelict caravan into a mobile bird hide, which travelled to urban nature sites to talk to people about nature in the city. In each place, we discovered things people cared about or areas where nature needed support to respond to through our work. In Hanley Park, we learned that there's an amazing collection of trees that's not well known, and so we created a tree trail leaflet and a series of these little plaques to put up on the trees to tell people about that. At Westport Lake, we learnt that many of the birds have angel wing, which is a wing deformity as a result of their bread diet. So we organised a bread swap, swapping visitors to the lake's bread for sweet corn, and commissioned sculptor Mally Mallinson to use the bread to make an extinct breadbird sculpture to help us to talk to people about a more varied diet for the birds. We hadn't long had our first daughter, Rowan, when we began this project, and the experience of creating space in our lives to be in nature with others was so valuable and something I return to in my work today. Okay, now getting on to the last couple of projects I wanted to share. First, the Spode Rose Garden, continuing in this body of work which was aiming to look at the spaces in the city that opened up as a result of the decline in industry. Since approximately 2013, I've been aiming to change the way I was working towards a longer-term approach to intervening on a site. This project is where I would say I learnt the most about participatory processes. Back in 2013, we at Airspace Gallery, so that was Andy, my partner, and Glenn Stoker, began to think about the abandoned garden on one side of the Spode factory. At the time, this was the entrance into the British Ceramics Biennial every other year. So during festival year, 30,000 people would be expected to enter the exhibition through this garden. Back in 2013, the enormous weeping willow had taken over one end of the garden, and the rest of the space was overgrown with weeds. Aside from a couple of uncared-for rose bushes, the garden wasn't much to speak of. We asked, since there is no park in Stoke Town, couldn't this garden be a real asset? We didn't have the money to renovate the whole space. We had 500 quid. So we marked out a triangle in the garden, and we cleared moss and weeds. We got soil delivered, which was our biggest expense apart from the flowers, and we cleaned the path by hand, even washing the gravel. And we built a raised bed in the middle of the triangle. Noticing the couple of rose bushes, we decided the space would now be the Spode Rose Garden and began calling it that. We worked with ceramic flower maker Rita Floyd, who created a bone china rose, the garden's emblem and a symbol of hope for what the garden could become. We took Rita's rose to Gareth Fryer of Fryer's Roses. We met him in his field of trial roses, and via a crowdfunder were able to work with him to name a special breed of rose for the garden. Hasn't moved on. Okay. It's a bit delayed, sorry. There we go. There's his rose garden. Yes, and the rose looked just like Rita's rose and had a really wonderful scent. This included working with him to create a first set of rose bushes which were delivered in time for BCB 2015. It was once these roses were installed in the garden that the City Council noticed the physical proposal we had made in the abandoned garden and committed to work with us to see the full garden renovation. We did a big community consultation to find out what people wanted to see happening in the garden and to invite anyone that was interested to form a group, the Friends of Spode Rose Garden, to be involved in transforming the space with us. People told us that they wanted to see Spode heritage reflected in the garden design, but the forming of the group was key in considering how we could ensure the sustainability of the project. So we would be going from 3 artists working together on the project to a group of people working together to develop and sustain the garden for years to come. And this was the initial design for the garden. The garden launched in 2016, and Rita's Bone China Rose and Gareth's Living Rose continue to be a focal point in the garden ever since. And over the years, we've hosted so many community events centering around nature and gardening. In 2017, the group were pleased to win a silver gilt medal at RHS Tatton for our Blooming Border, which was based on the Spode Blue Italian pattern and which after the show was installed in the garden where it remains. And the garden is an important space to celebrate the relationship between ceramics and nature, and we've hosted artist residencies and workshops and creative projects in the garden ever since. Just one example, when it catches up, is Louise Adams. Oh, sorry, it skipped past that one. Is Louise Adams' year-long residency in the garden, which created a wonderful body of work and included the blue banners which are in the background there. So yeah, please go down to the garden and have a look at them in person. One thing I wanted to note in relation to this project is that there's a certain kind of energy in the life cycle of a long-term project. The people that are inspired to work on a transformation project, who can be excited to physically transform a physical space with you, may not be the same people who will want to stay with the project and sustain long-term. The long-term maintenance is a different kind of energy and maybe a different kind of person, but certainly with this garden project, I've always appreciated the space that the garden offers us to come together and be creative in nature. Okay. Just recently, I've been working on another project along the canal between Hanley Park and Etruria to, again, draw attention to nature and to think about the problem that biodiversity, of biodiversity loss that we have in cities. And I've been really pleased to be working with Canal and River Trust and Appetite to create, well, first of all, a series of walks where we would bring people along the canal side to look at the plants and to focus on and share information with fellow walkers. People would often tell me that they wished that the information I was sharing about the plants along the canal was written down so that they could share the stories of the plants with others. And in response to this, and to reframe our canals from industrial transport routes into the nature havens that they are, I've created a set of ceramic plaques which celebrate the plants growing along the cut. Again, this is a way to draw attention to the nature on our doorstep. And alongside the plaques that I've created, and which will launch on May the 10th, so please come to Hanley Park and walk along the canal that day, I've created a set of 22 plant cards which tell people about the canal side plants, sharing folklore, medicinal and culinary uses, and other general information about the plants. And we're distributing those to community groups, schools, and individuals to encourage more people to walk along the canals and enjoy the nature there. Okay. So now the last project I'm going to talk about today. And I've reserved this space to tell you about the biggest and most challenging and enjoyable project I've had the opportunity to work on in the city. Quite a lot of the work I've done, much of which I haven't told you about because I haven't had time, has been quite short time frame. And I began to wonder what more can we understand about the impact of the work that we do as artists when we work where we live. So bringing us back to where I started, talking about the Pathfinder Housing Renewal Programme and the exposed, half-demolished terraced house, which led to looking at brownfields, the other half of my research turned to thinking about housing and how government decision-making can make or break a neighbourhood. In some areas of the city, the Pathfinder Housing Renewal Programme meant an opening up of brownfield sites, some of which have only recently been developed. However, in a couple of the earmarked areas, the compulsory purchase process was really slow, and in one neighbourhood close to the city centre where I now live and work, by the time the scheme was scrapped in 2011, there were families living next door to boarded-up homes, and the resulting stripping of community infrastructure and the inhospitable street scene had created numerous issues. The image here shows national media coverage at the time that the scheme was scrapped. The City Council, having purchased 35 properties across 5 streets, needed to be imaginative about what to do to try to tackle the residual issues and announce the £1 home scheme. I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about that, but just quickly, as an artist with a social arts practice, interested in the impact of regeneration on communities, my partner Andy and I applied and were selected for the scheme. At the time, we would, as artists with fairly precarious incomes, have struggled to get a traditional mortgage, so for personal reasons too, the scheme was appealing. 3 stipulations that it's worth mentioning about the scheme. There was a cap on household income. Households had to commit to live in the houses for at least 10 years and had to contribute to community development. That last one, as an artist working across participatory and co-creative practice, felt like something we could offer a lot to. So in 2014, we moved into our £1 house. Soon after moving in, I began a 3-year project, which was initially a hands-on creative ceramic making project commissioned by British Ceramics Biennial to create celebratory community plate to be used at community events. But really, it was an opportunity to talk to neighbours about what worked and what needed work in the area. However, within weeks of the project beginning, from a tent on the nearby green space because the pub, shop and community centre were all boarded up, the community let me know loud and clear that while a community ceramic may be nice, that wasn't really what was needed. They needed a permanent space for coming together and getting to know each other. Rebecca Davies, who isn't here today, but we do have Mavis Davis, came to the area with her pop-up temporary social space, which drew the same conclusions. The community needs a space to come together. So listening to that, we joined forces. Rebecca and I began a collaboration in 2016, which is still going strong today. And we found many shared ways of working with character, through social arts practice, and even a love of Derek Jarman. And we had a lot of fun, always, working together, which feels important in the work that we do. Our focus in the neighbourhood has been on the derelict Portland Inn pub and demonstrating to the council that the community wanted, needed and had a plan for how to take over the building and to transform it into the community infrastructure which the area badly needed. So starting with a programme in 2016 to involve the community in putting together a business plan for the building, we asked initial questions and programmes which focused on finding out what the community might want from the building, who should be involved and what might happen there. Importantly, we've always had a focus on skills development to ensure that the project is sustainable and to build agency and social and cultural capital in the community. One of the key aspects of the work has been to recognise the need to slowly build trust with neighbours who'd been through the really traumatic regeneration scheme, showing that we're in this work for the long haul and to build up confidence to get involved in the decision-making needed as a community to make the change we want to see happen. The way we work and have always worked is to design creative projects with our neighbours which respond to urgencies and desires emerging in the neighbourhood. Depending on what's raised, we will often collaborate with neighbours and bring in specialist practitioners to help us deliver creative projects. They can be artists, architects, designers, filmmakers, and back in 2018 we built a temporary space to work from, and for 4 weeks we ran a programme of activity, but importantly we set up an architecture school with fantastic architect Godson Egbo to redesign the pub building on the street with the community. So now in 2025, we're renovating the old pub building to become the first cultural centre of its kind in Stoke-on-Trent, providing much needed cultural infrastructure. Our neighbours have been involved in and contribute to our organisation and creative programme since the very start, constantly shaping how we're organised and the future of our building. We practice participatory governance for community-led change. But what does that mean? We set up a community decision-making panel in 2018, which has enabled us to look at how our community can formally contribute to decision-making processes locally. What started as a project with 2 artists working together has grown into an arts and community-based organisation employing 8 people. They are artists, youth specialists, a documenter, a bookkeeper, and we now have a wonderful advisory board and 3 non-executive directors drawn from the neighbourhood to stand alongside Rebecca and I. Shout out to Portland Inn team and community. And in 2013, we became an Arts Council England national portfolio organisation, which secures the long-term future of the organisation and the community building. At the moment, all of our conversations are focused on the materials needed for the retrofit of the pub. We have a timetable for when material decisions need to be made within our building with Cornerstone Construction, who we're working with, and we research the options together. We go on fact-finding visits and we research the materials to determine how much the material costs, how far it's travelled, what its environmental impact is, and whether or not it's going to make the building cheaper to run, because we can't make a burden for the community for the future. We then have a vote on which option to choose. So some images here from a couple of weeks past when we were in the pub building choosing the cladding for the front of the building and deciding how charred we wanted the charred wood to be. One of the projects we've been working on since 2020 is the writing and now delivery of our 100-year plan, which recognised that as a small community-based arts organisation, we need to build resilience into how we work, as due to the nature of our neighbourhood, which is in the 10% most deprived in the UK, the impact of external forces like COVID, fuel poverty, the cost of living crisis can be felt quickly and which we can often find impacts on how we work. We realised that having a long-term plan for positive change helps us to imagine the future together, but also to take a longer-term view, even when in the short term urgencies occur. We know that our 100-year plan is working for our neighbourhood, but we've also heard from other places how it's inspiring them. In Dudley, they now have a 100-year cultural strategy. In Grimsby, East Marsh United have a plan for 100 homes for 100 years. And Dartington Forest are collaborating with Natural England on a 100-year care plan for North Woods, all informed by our 100-year plan. Storytelling is a key aspect of what we do. It's the key to seeing the way our community is discussed nationally change. And it was very exciting last year in April for our story to be shared on BBC Two in a 1-hour programme as part of Andy Oliver's Fabulous Feasts. So, coming to the end, first we're rebuilding the pub and making sure that every inch of it represents our community, from the tiles, the roof structures and through to the doorknobs. Each aspect of the building is a creative opportunity to learn new skills and innovate together, imagining the future for our neighbourhood. And once complete, the retrofit of this Victorian terrace will become a demonstrator for a wider neighbourhood renewal, which we'll work on next. Without a long-term plan for continuing to resource the work, the community will always be reliant on public funds. As our interventions improve the neighbourhood and we begin to achieve the goals of making the area a better place to live, it may become harder to draw down funds as priorities necessarily shift towards areas where there is not the social capital that we've built. So what's our long-term plan? In our research into assessing the health impacts locally of things which stop people from sleeping at night in the neighbourhood, we found that causing the most problems with health and well-being is negligent landlords who are not providing adequate homes. Tenants are afraid to complain as they're worried that they'll lose their home. So once we complete the pub, our aim is to explore next community-led housing renewal, which would enable us to assemble homes that are not just livable, but comfortable, healthy, affordable and secure, with all of our learning in the retrofit of the Victorian terraced pub able to go into that next stage of development. Plus, any potential profits from rental incomes will not just be going straight out of the neighbourhood to negligent landlords, but supporting the resourcing of community life. The key here is in the people of the area working together to create the future. So thinking about what this means and why this works in the context of Stoke-on-Trent Centenary year, my reflection is that as a city, we're used to making things together, whether that's a pot, a garden, a community building, a neighbourhood. We have the skills when we come together to reimagine the city and recognise that one of our greatest assets here is ourselves when we work together. Having seen the creative community grow and develop here in the city over the past 20 years, I can attest that it is a much more viable place to practice as an artist these days. Now, given the undoubted challenges we face globally, it feels more important than ever to consider the role of creativity and imagination in considering how we create a livable future. Thanks everyone for listening and for bearing with the slides that were a little bit behind me. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Round of applause for Anna. Anna, would you like to take a question? It is not compulsory. Some universities don't allow questions at this point in time. Everybody goes off home, but given your size of your audience,
yeah, if we have time, do people have time? Want to ask
if anyone
a question?
wants to ask anything to Anna, I've got one for you if nobody does. Right. How do you scale this up? Is it just about money or is it something else? Is it about availability of land, about partnerships? What you're doing is wonderful. Stoke-on-Trent needs more of this. Mm-hmm. You know, is it simply about money or is it something else? Is it about the planning authority? Is it some kind of unlockable barrier? If you can talk about how we need more of you, but more of this as well.
Yeah, thank you. So we do sometimes get asked this in relation to the Portland Inn project. How do you replicate this or how do you scale it up? And I think it's important to sort of notice that the work that we do is very, very wedded to place. To the place where we are and is in response very much to that place. So although it can't be replicated, the approach may be possibly sort of looked at for other places, which is to kind of look at what people want to do to make their lives better. And I think that's something we all share. We all want to have better, healthier, happier lives. But I think that what is really needed is for policymakers to start to notice that communities, when put in charge of decision-making about their places, can really make a sustainable difference, rather than telling people what will make them healthier and happier. Find out from them what they want to do, because that will be way more sustainable. You won't have to kind of keep rethinking when things don't go wrong, because you'll have all of the people assembled to sort of do the work in their neighbourhoods, which is what they care about.
And on that note, one more. Go on. Do you want the microphone?
What level of participation do you get with people actually living in the neighbourhood? Is it generally the same faces or...?
So the neighbourhood is around 500 homes, and we work currently from a shipping container, and we work on a green space. So there is a limit to how many people can come at any one time, but we do have really good connections with everyone across the community. We are sure that when the building is ready in October, we'll be able to welcome more of our older generation who perhaps don't want to be outside and in a shipping container. But yeah, we have really good engagement with families, and particularly with the children and young people in the neighbourhood. Yeah.
Any further questions? I notice on the next generation, there's your daughter and my son, they're a similar age in the room. I think we're going to take two. We're going to take yours first at the front and the one at the back, and then we'll close after that. Thank you. Two questions.
Thank you, Anna. That was a really interesting talk. What would you say to a student who lived 250 miles away from here, who'd never been to Stoke, who was thinking of coming here to study and being part of the city? How would you persuade them that was a really good choice?
Maybe, thanks Terry, maybe I would tell them about my experience, and also that I think that Stoke, there are still a lot of gaps, and there are still a lot of things that we need in terms of creative infrastructure. But if you're anyone like me and the other people in the room that I've worked with, we're not afraid of those gaps, and we see those as opportunities. And I think sometimes if you go to some other cities where there is a really well-developed art scene, it can be difficult to see what your place is within that. So somewhere like Stoke, I think it's really possible to make things happen and find people who want to do that with you. So I think it's a great place, actually, to be a student.
About the final question at the back left, thank you.
So I attended a talk a few weeks ago here by Dr. Mark McKenna, and he brought up that there was a scheme going on in the northeast where they went, oh, let's build a bunch of film studios, but there's not been the investment into the community itself to go and fill the jobs in those film studios. So like with when the BBC moved to Manchester in 2011, they just dragged a bunch of people to London, threw them in Manchester, and instead of going to the deprived areas, they went to Chorlton, they went to Prestwich. So do you think that the investment should go into the deprived areas first, and then you tell companies, come here, invest in the deprived areas, and then in 5-10 years, you have a captive workforce?
I think that city development needs a mixed approach. I think if you fail to tackle the deprived areas, then you're always going to be sort of struggling to move things on. As we see with our city council, so much of their budget goes on to deal with the social care issues and results of things like the blight that I've talked about. So if you don't deal with those things, it's going to be really difficult for your place to move on. So I think, yeah, we need to think about both things, but not just going for the kind of shiny, big name opportunities, but also thinking about what the people of a place need. And when you have that resource and investment, what impact do you want it to have, and how long do you want it to last? I think, you know, making sure that it is investing in the place and the people of that place and skills development for those people is a really key approach.
Can I have a final round of applause for Anna? Thank you, Anna.
Thanks a lot. See you soon.